All right, well, there we go. Thank you, everyone, for stopping in here and choosing this as your choice. We'll find out if that was a good choice later today. I'm going to talk about open source in government, and we're especially talking about small government, big problems. So, level setting. I am from the great county of Cass in North Dakota, which is the only town in North Dakota you've ever heard of, Fargo. We hold approximately 25% of the state's population, which is smaller than Minneapolis by like half. It's about 220K on a good day. So when I'm talking small, I am definitely talking small. About me, I'm a really big nerd. You can't tell with the shirts on here, but I've got Pokemon tattoos and a D&D tattoo everywhere. It's fantastic. My wife has accepted it. We've moved on. It's been great. I've been in public service for about 20 plus years now, which is terrifying because I used to have a lot of hair. It has now migrated downwards and things just continued on. I started my career in K-12 education as a one-man shop. I was supporting a school district of about 1,500 kids in Midwest Minnesota. One man set up there, and we made the great choice to go one-to-one laptops utilizing Linux-based machines for that. If I was doing that again today, God no, that was a horrible idea. Because I don't know how kids do it, but they can spill milk on anything. After about a decade in K-12, I went over to the city of Fargo as a senior network administrator, as an individual contributor, worked there for about 5 years, and then moved to Cass as a director of IT. During all of this time, I've really never had a budget. We have numbers on a piece of paper that allows us to purchase some things, but for those of you that work in government in here, we all know that the numbers on that budget are at the political whim of the elected officials at the time, and they may change at any moment. So having to work and find good solutions has been something that's been ongoing throughout my entire career. So just so I understand the lay of the land here, because this could go other ways, show of hands, who here is existing like a government worker or government adjacent? Awesome. All right, and everyone else, I'm assuming we're somewhere else, which is fantastic. So, government has a set of issues. Yeah, that's the tone of this. If this is your sign, this is the tone moving forward. I hear this all the time from people. Why can't you just do that? I have an Alexa at home. Alexa can do things like set my calendar. Why can't I do that for the government? And I heavily sigh and drink a caffeinated beverage, and we go into a conversation on security. We go into a conversation on a large amount of things. But it's a legitimate question to our citizens. Why can't you do the thing that I want you to do in the way that I want you to do it? Ignoring the fact that there's 45 different people with different ideas on how we want to do this, and we have a large amount of potential limitations. This is not coming from a difficult place. This is coming from them wanting to interact with their representation in a way that fits their needs. And that can change dramatically on who that is. And I would honestly say they are right to be frustrated when the only way that they can pay for something would be dropping a check off between the hours 2 and 4 on Tuesdays, because that's the only day that Sheila works, and Sheila's the only one who knows how that system works, which we used to do until last year. Government has its own weird set of constraints. So let's just go over the reality of this. Government is limited in many ways. First off, staffing can be exceptionally difficult, especially for our smaller areas. North Dakota has 53 counties within it. Out of those 53, 6 have full-time IT staff that are employed by the county. The rest are utilizing MSPs, VARs, or that guy down the street, Joe, who helped them build a computer in 1987. He's still there. It's still the same computer. He just keeps adding parts to it. This is the reality of what we're finding in these small municipalities, because there is simply not talent available, there is not resources available, and if and when they find something, they're costed out by it. North Dakota has seen this very heavily, especially in the western side of our state, due to our little oil boom we had in the aughts. Costs started going up dramatically due to our oil and gas infrastructure, stealing all local talent. Anyone that was even semi-capable was brought into these other industries because they could do things like pay more than $15 an hour. Getting that back has been exceptionally difficult and is one of our largest constraints. The other big one that our government friends in here really know, every single thing we do is in the public's eye. You ever have an outage as a government? It could be like a patch that went awry or a switch fan that failed or something. I have personally been on the news because a switch fan decided to die at 3 in the morning. It was redundant, didn't matter, because we had to reboot a switch, which meant that someone in one of our jails was delayed from being released for 32 minutes. And I was on the news the next day discussing this failure in IT because we were holding up someone's physical rights. Were they wrong? No, 100% accurate. Did I ever get the budget for redundant switches? No, it's going to happen again, and I'll be back on the news. But this is the reality that we are required to have high availability, 24/7, bulletproof systems on a non-existent budget, and with an expectation from the public that these services will be available, because that's why I pay taxes, and I don't want you to pay more taxes. On the left here, it's really high level. This is actually pulled directly from Governor Armstrong in North Dakota. This is his address to every agency here for 2026. North Dakota is a biennium structure. We budget every 2 years because Lord knows nothing changes over 12 months, right? My favorite one, no new FTEs. Plot twist, you also can't backfill. Someone retires, that's gone forever. You want a new building? Well, you can't have that. We have buildings. We have existing buildings. They have asbestos in them. Don't lick the pipes. You're a government worker. All these other things are great. And this leads to some just creative problem solving. And I will openly admit, the right picture on there, I put this in every talk I do about government IT. I am not inheriting responsibility for this because I was not with the agency when it happened. I was with another agency that worked in partnership with them. And what you see there is a Cisco 2960X that is on an OSHA-approved folding chair rack. That OSHA-approved rack, and you can tell it's actually got fiber feeds in there, it is serving clients. This thing was serving a 911 facility. Yeah, when they talk about uptime, you end up with creative things like this. I won't name and shame the organization that did this, but they are not in the building, so I will. It was the city of Fargo. The reason this happened was it had to be done. It had to be done now. We had no budget for it. And frankly, the technician involved was one of those that we've all met. My job is to do X. I have completed X. Now, if you look really close, my favorite part on here, there is an open space in the rack behind it. It could have just slid right in there. But that would have required roughly 15 minutes of work. And if you've ever worked with 911 facilities, 15 minutes is an eternity. Especially when someone's going there going, you know, someone might be dying. I don't know if they are or not, but they could be, and it's your fault. Get the switch online. Some other limitations we get on here, again, left side is again right from my director here. From our governor, you're looking, for us, we are the above $20 million kind of budget. We've been directed for the next biennium, a 10% flat cut right across all budget items there. And that is everything from employees all the way down. So if you've quoted out hardware recently or looked at your Microsoft renewal, or by God, if you do work with Deloitte or Oracle, 10% is usually going the other direction every time you get an invoice, not down. These are the realities of what we're seeing in government right now, especially in North Dakota, because we are having to do that typical do more with less, do more with less. It's not exactly a friendly environment. Add on to the fact that I will stand and hang my hat on the fact that government, outside of some very specialized industries such as nuclear or something like that, have some of the most diverse and stringent compliance requirements available, such as my favorite fence, CGIS. CGIS has great compliance requirements. They are very modern. We're talking, let's get multi-factor down to everything. All of your switches better be in support. Everything must be good across. But then we cut our budget by 10%. So we have these conflicting options here that are really difficult. And for those that work in government, you probably are very aware, all of this is led by elected officials. And elected officials are fantastic. They are there to serve our citizens, but they also want to get reelected more than likely. So choices are made not only for the expediency and the supportability of the environment, but also the political ramifications of what happens here. We're finding that very heavily around our area, where choices are being made around where does funding go? Does funding go to Health and Human Services? Does it go to law enforcement? And nowhere in this conversation is, does it go to the IT that is needed to support all of these other agencies? Because we are that invisible bubble that we've succeeded. We are a victim of our own success in some ways. And what's a computer cost? Like $400 at Best Buy? That's fine, right? My son has an Acer and a Chromebook, so we're just gonna roll those out. It's okay. All of this comes together though with the reality of government. You end up in interesting environments, especially in smaller agencies, where you have the entire government operations, be this a small agency, very small agency, whatever else, and everything on there serving these citizens are held back by one person. And I use Eric because he's my network service manager. He is fantastic. He is not this person, but he said I could use his name. We run into this all the time. Just this morning during the keynote, I received a phone call from the state of North Dakota. They have a centralized IT that we do some work with. And they were like, hey, we see that you submitted a ticket 3 weeks ago regarding some firewall changes. And well, Ryan is back in the office now and he would like to talk about it. The entire state of North Dakota's firewall changes goes through one guy and his name is Ryan. This is the reality we find in here because of all of these issues we've came across. Retention is exceptionally difficult. When people start to get good in these environments, they leave. And rightfully so, because we can't pay them worth a dang. In addition to that, especially in North Dakota, it's a barren wasteland out there. We have counties that have under 2,000 population, but they have all of these same requirements. So finding someone who is willing and able to move out to Bottineau, North Dakota, to utilize and support the county and the sheriff and the jail, all for, let's say, $22 an hour. And since it's government and we have stupid ideas, they still want you to have a 4-year degree and a couple certifications, even to be considered there to be in the resume pool. And then they come to sessions like this and go, no one wants to work anymore. There's a little pain in my soul as I do these, so. I will say, it's very, most of the talks I end up giving are in North Dakota, which there's a different vibe in this room, which I appreciate. That's how we'll call it. This leads to a couple nightmares. The first one, by God, will those vendors come calling? Oh, you can't hire someone? I can sell you something to fix that. Don't worry about it. We can't adapt those systems either because, well, obviously you bought this system. Why would you change it? You should change to the system. Oh, your elected officials don't like that? Well, too bad. We have an additional module you can buy that will give you that. And it's licensed on a per seat on Wednesdays model. So, and the really one here is you can't move quickly at all. Because government works at the speed of government, which is the hardest thing I've ever avoided. Who loves having to do a budget for the next year in July of the following year? Because technology doesn't change at all, especially over 6 to 8 months. So I have to submit my budget for 2027 by the end of this month. And I'm effectively rolling a D100 and going, that is how much percent that they will try to increase my hardware, and that's what I'll budget for. It all adds up to be an environment where there's a large amount of potential pain points, but there is this golden opportunity that sadly is not being used as much. So let's talk about where government actually has some abilities. We don't lack capacity. And again, small government specific here. A large amount of these agencies, for the limited ITs that they have, they're not exactly busy. These people are the ones that are out there clearing printer jams, they're out there clearing out very basic tasks, but from a proactive capability or the ability to reach out, they could go for this. We have the capacity. What we struggle with is excess capacity. They may not be busy, but they fill their day. There is tasks that happen and go through that need to happen at a specific time. And in government, our work is highly cyclical. If it's election season, things are ramping up for elections. If it's property tax seasons, things are ramping up there. And all that other work, the maintenance, the infrastructure, all of that has to fit in around all of these other things. There's a large also assumption about expertise. And in many smaller governments, expertise is a lacking tool. They cannot find staff out there that involve or understand what a modern environment is. And for many cases, that's because A, they've never been exposed, or B, they've never had a request to do it. I sit on the North Dakota State Local Cybersecurity Grant Board. We get all those grant applications in. For us, we approve them. Last year alone, I approved 17 applications for switch and hardware refreshes, which is great. They're being proactive. Until I saw that it was 14 Meraki and 2 TP-Link Omadas that are going into these environments. And the reason why is very simple. They're easy. They're something we understand. It gives me a GUI I can work with, and I don't have to think about anything else. Or my favorite answer is, that's what the guy that does this told me to buy. And he happens to be the reseller and the only quote we got. Government work is highly specialized. There's not an agency out there that's going to have to do things like collect taxes as a private industry. At least I hope not. We have highly specialized tasks that are needed to be done that are very niche-based. However, when you start talking to vendors or other options, you end up with two potential options. Either something that is not niche-based at all, they're just basically saying, let's adapt you to industry standard, and you start doing that, and if anyone's went down that path, adapting governmental practices to industry standard can be an absolute nightmare. Solely because we have different compliance requirements, different setups there, different expectations, and different levels of the public trust. Or it can go the exact opposite way, where they build you this bespoke application that is designed only for your niche. And then in 2 years, when the legislation decides to change something, you have to do it again. North Dakota ran into that very recently, where they wanted to change some of our property tax code. They've put in a new requirement, which was not listed, that no municipal's budget can go up by more than 3% in a calendar year. Inflation in North Dakota was 4.6% as of the May numbers, but that doesn't matter. This required us to have all of our ERP systems, all of our property tax systems, all of these things be able to adapt to have this new cap in place to allow us to report and understand where we are at. The difficulty in this was, well, a vendor stopped in. Tyler Technologies, for those of you that work in government, I'm sorry if that triggered you, because it does to me every time. But they were very happy to say, we'll develop that for you. It's $700,000, and we'll have it tomorrow. And they did, and now that's what people are running for those that were on that software stack. They're further locked into that environment. What leads to the worst issue is that flexibility. When you are working in a niche, when you are working in an environment that requires specialization, requires all of these tools, you end up with these nightmare environments where you do it this way because you do it this way. And if you try to change from that way, not only will the people begin to scream loudly and frequently, but they also will find that the environment doesn't support that flexibility. And there's sort of the chicken and the egg problem here of how do we get the flexibility when we can't do the thing, and so on and so forth. But then we start looking at the vendor side, and vendors don't have a large amount of help for this here either. They are just living and breathing on lock-in. They want to make sure you're in there, you're locked in, because that data is what keeps them going. And for many of these vendors, they're highly smart about this. My favorite to use is Tyler Technologies, and just to confirm, there's not a Tyler rep in here. I haven't seen one. I don't think they believe in open source, so I wasn't super worried. They have this great example. It's almost like Microsoft in the early 90s of, hey, someone else does that better. Let's buy them and never talk about it again. And then we don't have competitors anymore. They do this and then raise your year over year over year. Our law enforcement system runs on Tyler Technologies. We were one of the first in the country that actually spans across 2 states, because Fargo is located right on the border of Minnesota, over on the other side. We have Moorhead and Dilworth and other towns all in the same unified law enforcement system, which is great when you want to mix compliance requirements between 2 states with vastly different ideas of what compliance is. Things like use of force laws. It's a nightmare. They've set this up now, and we're having an upgrade on this system today, so I'm watching the Slack as we go, and it's just great. They are so locked in that they can't log into their databases any longer. They are keeping these locked down to the vendor in the name of security because this is specialized equipment. This system alone, if I remember the last correction on there, was around a $7.1 million annually just for the baseline, and then we license per user beyond that. So when you figure in all of the law enforcement agencies, it's a substantial part of the setup here. The downfall being, there's not another option in our region that can be supportable on there, and the cost of migration due to lock-in is huge. And frankly, they come from an AS400 based solution prior to this, the good old green screen. That thing will outlive the heat death of the universe. We keep it alive in our data centers solely to make sure it keeps doing that, and it's going without a hitch. The rigidity of this also is where we start running into a large amount of issues. I'm not up here to say false truths or anything, and I realize that North Dakota has 800,000 people in it. We're not exactly a big drop in the state bucket up there. But when it comes down to customizations or built-in things specific for the laws of North Dakota or the laws of Cass County, working with vendors has been exceptionally difficult, even though these are requirements from legislature. None of us want to do these things either, but the law says the law, and that's sort of what happens. We've had law changes that have taken over a year and a half to be reflected into some of our law enforcement softwares, solely due to the rigid nature and that slow development cycle, because we're not a Texas, we're not a New York, we're not a California. We don't have the numbers to leverage. And they're basically standing back going, what are you gonna do, leave? Exactly. And it's not only law enforcement. We've had similar discussions with other vendors. One of my favorite things still is standing in front of my commission with my 3-year Microsoft renewal and having my commissioner go, have you tried negotiating with Google? And I said, yeah, we tried. No, that's not how this works. And I could probably go back and say, we're thinking of Google, Microsoft, and they're gonna go, cool, we're still here when you come back. Just the reality of it. But that's where we end up with our elected officials and their understandings. And since all of this couples together, we get our favorite friend, the year-over-year uplift. Because why is it not fun enough that everything is subscription-based now? We have to do a market adjustment every year just to make sure that you're getting the features you need. And those same features now cost 7% more because that's infrastructure, Strait of Hormuz. Doesn't matter why, they just do somehow. The cost of oil goes up, and therefore the cost of software as well. They run on diesel, folks. But at the same time, open source has its own set of problems, because we start looking at other alternatives. There are tons of applications out there, tons upon tons of them. And we have teams that struggle doing things like simple M365 mindset transitions, or moving a SharePoint document, or for some people, setting up new print servers, things that for many we consider as the basis. A large amount of open source products are great, and I love them, we use them all the time, but the engineer mindset is firmly in place on the deployment model, how things are supported, how things are configured, and everything else. I had a meeting last week with the National Association of Counties in North Dakota. We were talking about some great success that we've had with our wedding platform. Before, if you wanted to get married in Cass County at the courthouse, you literally had to call the courthouse, and they got you to the wedding coordinator, who would then find a spot on the calendar and book and all of that kind of nightmare. So we said that's dumb, and coded our own system on there that's online and so forth. And we now support this for the majority of the counties in North Dakota. But we're having this discussion and saying, there's 2 ways we can deploy this. We could host it centrally in Cass, it'll go in our Azure, our GCP, or wherever, and you guys have to work with us. We're sort of the MSP at that point. Or we can happily show you how we did it. We can show you how we deployed this, how this all goes. This is not a complicated app. It's a Flask front end with a MySQL database or MariaDB. It's 3 Docker containers and a Compose or a Helm chart. And when I start talking about things like containers, the glaze over on these people's eyes, does that run on Windows? What about Mac? Can it run on, Linux. I tried that once. It was a Ubuntu, and I don't know, there was an animal, and I tried to right click, and the X's were on the wrong side of the screen, and at that point I just decided, you know what, I don't have this option now. That is the reality of it. The people that would benefit the most from these systems have no idea how to run them. They are aware that they exist, but there's no benefit to them in their heads of learning something new. And I'm not trying to make this generational thing or anything like that, but of a certain vintage of people, they are set in their ways, and they will die with Windows as it goes. I use my predecessor as an example. He worked at the county for 27 years, which should be a big enough red flag right in a row there. Fargo, if you're unaware, has one of the largest Microsoft campuses geographically now within its borders. Geographically, because they keep closing buildings. But that's because when they purchased Great Plains software from ex-Governor Burgum, then turned it into Dynamics, they needed to keep it developing. My predecessor loved that. He would drive a mile down the road and go talk to people and come back with a Surface, and next thing you know, we're buying Surfaces. And that's a reality we're finding because it is working through these systems. It also becomes very difficult for some of our people here, and this is the ongoing problem, that if they're willing to try this out, then they go look at the documentation that was last updated in 2019 by someone's git commit saying, I'm done, this is enough. They have no idea how to do it, and they try it, they try to push through, the deploy fails, they get frustrated, they break out a bottle of something and start looking for a support option, which is where clear support begins a strong failure. Government's going to want support. Now, I am of the opinion, speaking personally, that I've never worked with a support team that has been worth the money I pay for them. And having the ability to point a finger at someone means nothing when a 911 operator is yelling at me that people are dying. I can't go, well, my ticket with them is number 96113, and we're waiting for a response from the escalation engineer. So if people could just drive safe, not start fires for a little bit, that would be great. It just all keeps adding up on there. And this is not a knock against open source. I just wanted to use the Bart Simpson gif. But we are trying to make this better. We are definitely trying. But finding that lowest common denominator mindset is exceptionally difficult because as engineers, as developers, as program maintainers, we assume too much for people. When I worked in K-12, I had a rule. Anything I rolled out in IT, the first thing I would do is go down to the kindergarten teacher's room. She was 74 years old. She was everyone's grandma. And if she could figure it out, I knew I was okay. If she got stuck on it, back to the drawing board, break out the crayons, it's too difficult. Also, if you've never worked in K-12, kindergarten rooms are both terrifying and the sweetest thing you'll ever see. You'll be in the room just working with them. They're all happy, and next thing you know, there's a child attached to your hip. You don't know this child. It's just hands above the waist and keep moving. They move on organically. The first time it happened, you look at the teacher like, it's fine, just go on. She just likes to hug. So this all just comes together into the biggest chicken and egg problem ever. What do we do on here? Things are difficult. We can't change anything because we're locked into vendors and we don't have options. We can't try something new because, well, that requires effort, and we've tried to try things new before, and it turns out it was really hard to do so. And I'm going to speed up because I didn't just realize the time. But we have to figure out here, and it comes down to the biggest problem, is that we can't improve. We keep repeating these same paradigms repeatedly because the cost and the effort of doing something different is exceptionally difficult. Which is where I think, from an open source standpoint, not only from the community, from developers, from everything else, but also from the user side, we can all do a little bit better on that just to find these solutions for how government would work. Now again, this is focused around government. We are a very special, weird niche, as we've talked about. As such, many of these don't fly with potentially other communities, and that's where this becomes a little bit more difficult. Government work by default should be transparent. We are working in the public eye as much as we possibly can. Now, I'm not saying we're going to publish your social security numbers out there, not on purpose. But we have a large amount of data that we're moving around that is principal to our citizens that we need to make sure we are handling in secure, safe, and ethical ways. Utilizing through our existing systems, such as the vendor-led systems with proprietary formats, doesn't exactly feel great to me from a transparency side because I can't explain what they're doing with it because they won't let me look at it. In addition to that, though, we also need to make sure that we're locked into some open kind of standards. Having solutions available that work upon open solutions is huge, because then we're not locked into these exact systems. Anytime I see something that generates a report and the format is Crystal reports, I cry on the inside. Because A, I have to install Crystal reports, and that's a whole adventure. But B, I know that it's locked in, and they could have just given me a PDF, for God's sakes. It just continues through there. And all of this comes through with governments communicating where we've seen success, where we're seeing failures, and other situations. And it really leads to what I think is one of the most important parts of governmental IT usage of open source, is control of their data. The control of the data in government is critical solely because we need to know not only what we have, where it is, how we can use it, but also not be locked into some sort of vendor proprietary solution that limits us from the portability or the usability of this. We need to make sure that these systems are sustainable in our limitations. It can't be something saying that you need to maintain this level of partnership or this level of subscription, because I could go back to my office tomorrow. I actually have a meeting tomorrow, so let's hope it's not this one, where they say, hey, your budget is being cut by 6 figures across the board. That's just what it is. Figure out how that's going to work. That is a reality in government, especially in our K-12 or our higher ed at the moment with enrollment numbers. Being able to flexibly adjust these things is very important, which we can't do with that kind of lock-in. And that is not only vendor specific, that also goes to our open source products, where things are stored in potentially proprietary encryptions, or they are not well documented enough to have anyone understand how they can pull that data out. The understanding and that engineering mindset of, well, if you're going to do this, go look at the code and figure it out, is great if you have the resources to do that, which in reality, they do not. And they will then turn to AI, which may give them an answer or not. It may be correct or not, and who knows what's going to happen to the data at that point. Show of hands, I am very curious. Who would be happy if an AI integrated solution was responsible for calculating your property taxes? Because they're trying to sell that. They're also trying to sell AI assessment of your homes, which is great. They're like, just give us the overhead imagery from your last LiDAR pass. We'll tell you how much that house is worth. It's fine. Don't worry about it. I mean, Google does it all the time. Why can't you? Open source core is really where this option can come through. And I know that there's some strong thoughts on the idea of open core, enterprise licensing, hybrid kind of solutions, etc. That is something that works out surprisingly well in government, solely because of all of those limitations that we run across, be it from staffing or budgetary or things like that. Being able to utilize an open core kind of technology that builds on with potentially optional features or supportability or vendor integrations and things like that as modular systems that may carry a price tag can be exceptionally beneficial to government. Not everyone is going to need these options, and we understand that. So it's not responsible, in my view, for government to expect all of our toys in our playground to be there for everyone that needs it. I'm completely fine with people sort of having to pay to play a little bit once you get past that initial basic kind of solution. Now, where the caveats of this are is like if you start doing SSO tax or things like that, just right in the trash. But we really need to continue with that and work on outsourcing potentially the work sometimes, but not the control. It's that difference between going like full SaaS, where we are just a consumer of application X, versus let's just go back to on-prem Exchange and play with that nightmare for a while. We want to have that middle ground where we can have these abilities to do our work, do our basis, but we maintain that control and kind of environment. And the reason I say this is we're not anti-vendor by any means. We're not, be it closed, open, whatever. We're anti-dependency. Anytime that our government operations are dependent upon some third party doing their job, I think we've already failed. Not to point fingers at my friends here in Minnesota, but how's the DMV doing? For those of you unaware, the DMV in Minnesota has been on like, what, year 9 of a project now to modernize through, was it Deloitte or Oracle or something like that? I don't know, someone. In North Dakota, we can walk into the DMV, get a license in 25 minutes. They print it on site, it's fantastic. But But that shows we have made a dependency for a system that we do not have control of. And watching the legislature go, well, this sort of went off the rails, so we're going to need another $17.1 million. It'll be completed in 2034, maybe? That's what we're trying to avoid. Because again, citizens expect these services. They have to get these services. We don't have an option not to provide them. But we have a responsibility to provide them in a way that we can sustain in our limited resources and capacity. We don't need to solve the same problem 40,000 times. We have this example all the time. North Dakota has 53 counties. There are 53 different ways that they do the same exact job every time. That is asinine. We are wasting taxpayer dollars every space, and finding solutions like we found with the mayor's licenses allows us to actually unify that. And from a citizen standpoint, they can expect similar sources, similar access, similar processes wherever they go. Nothing bothers me more than having to do this over here and this over there because there's a 20-mile difference, and in the middle there's an invisible line that someone drew at one time. And now I have to do it completely differently. We can find solutions on here, and open source really is that backbone because it is built for these collaborations and methodologies. We've also got to remember not to develop for this guy. These are small teams. These small teams are highly experienced in their niche. I can't explain how things work in a recorder's office, but Sheena in my recorder's office can live and breathe that thing. Utilizing that expertise is fantastic, but if we are expecting that gentleman, who I really wish I could pull off that mustache, if we're the hair, no, that ship has sailed. We also have to keep in mind that the turnover in government is either two ways. Exceptionally rapid when we get our high flyers, especially fresh out of college, 18 months at best, and if I'm happy if I keep them that long. Or you're going to be there until you die at your desk. There's no middle ground. And I will say the ones that stick around forever, they find a plateau, and that is the plateau. I do not expect more. I do not expect less. They are consistent, and they do the thing, and that is great. But then I try to make them be that. That's not going to happen, ever. And if a product is expecting engineers, people that understand this process, it's exceptionally difficult. So if we're designing and deploying around sort of the everyman, the every person, the people that can read documentation and do the thing, they may not understand every step of what they're doing, but they can connect the dots enough to go forward on it. That's huge. And if there's any kind of vendor support or support, community support or anything that can answer those weird one-offs, that's where we're going to see success. This is what's worked for us. It's a whole splattering of things. There's nothing on there, but we literally use the majority of these every day in our environment. Across the board, I mean, all of our virtualization is open source on there. We have numerous setups. We're using tons for monitoring. We develop primarily Python and Go, but with a large amount of Windows, we still have to have the shame that is PowerShell. But across the board, we've had very good luck on this. Anything on there, feel free to grab me at the end of it. This is, again, just a splash of saying I actually do a thing. The one I do want to call out, though, if you have not used it before, is SSLH on the bottom left there. Fantastic SSL multiplexer if you're looking for something. We've had fantastic luck with it for effectively modern versions of port knocking. All of these solutions, though, have taken us to be able to meet needs that we did not have options for otherwise. And there's other things on here, like Nextcloud is listed. We primarily use that for integrations with other agencies that do not have Microsoft setups. We're a Microsoft shop because we're a government. But we have the great experience of, I tried to send a share link from SharePoint to this one over here in Traill County, and it asked them for a number to put in, and they don't understand it, and they need this for a court case. Well, now they have Nextcloud. All of these solutions are something that we have taken time internally to learn, support, deploy, and really try to break first. All of this is production as well. We don't have anything in here that's just hiding behind the scenes or things like that. Our primary ticket system, OS Ticket. Is it old? Yes. Does it work? Yes. Is it service now? Thank God, no. But it's a large amount of options for us here. So, and again, all these slides are up on the sked, so you don't have to take pictures, and you can actually copy paste. It helps out. So what do? In government, how do we figure this out? And it really, I think, starts coming down to the citizens. Citizens need to discuss with their governments, and yes, that means civic involvement. That means you gotta go talk to people and no one likes it. And you'll see things you've never wanted to see before. But we need to make sure that we're talking to people, tell people our clear expectations of what we as citizens want to see. What kind of environments and experiences do I want as a citizen to be able to work with my government? Some of our best things that we found on here, like our permitting system, which is internally developed, was asking from citizens who came forward saying, I just want to be able to come over, submit this, and I want to be able to do it from my phone. I want to be able to take my phone out, take pictures of where I want to build a shed, drop you a pin like I do with my kids when I say, where are you? It's 11 p.m. And just work from there. I don't want to have an assessor come out and draw pictures and get my land all painted up to build a shed. I'm going to Costco. I'm going to put it on wood. It doesn't matter. We listened. We developed that kind of solution. And when we were working with the department that was responsible for that, we were trying to figure out and kept a very core principle in mind. And that principle was every configuration option is a decision. Every configuration option is a potential failure. Because at 3 a.m., when it's the 911 person saying we need this up right now, and I go, well, was this a true or a false? That is not the question you want to have. And I have seen that be huge delays. So it comes back to that whole idea from open source maintaining and from the leadership. Maybe we don't need to expose everything right out the gate as mandatory config options, because we're assuming from that engineering mindset that we understand this environment, we understand the deployments, we want that level of granularity. That's doable, but put in some sane defaults. Make it so this thing will actually run with those sane defaults, maybe not perfectly, but it will give us something so people can actually make these choices and develop as they move forward. And hopefully make it so that they're not making a decision for the rest of their natural life when they set true at install. Because when you lock into that, that's going to be where they decide to change due to legislative action or something else. They're not going to blow it away. They're going to find something else. Because if they have to start over, we're government. Throw that baby out with the bathwater. Let's just spend some more tax dollars because obviously this didn't work last time, so let's try again. Basic rules of engagement, speed running because we're out of time here. Reduce the decisions on there. Let's get some opinionated defaults. Documentation is king. Without good documentation that's written to the level of basic crayon, basically, it's going to be an issue. We need to make sure that these systems are designed not to have an SME. If you're working with an SME, government's not going to work with you because they do not have that person, or they're worried that person will leave, and rightfully so. And real support, whatever that means to your project, as an option can be a huge differentiator when you start talking with governments. Even talking on the latest VMware nightmare blowup of, well, we're going to migrate to Proxmox, or we're going to migrate to XCP-NG. I've talked with numerous governments who have gone XCP solely because 24/7 support with 1 hour SLA in the continental United States. Versus going with a third party, and I know Proxmox is working on it, they're great tooling. But that has been the differentiator for them. So having options on there is huge. Really kick on FUD. FUD's not wrong. It's just incomplete. Support may or may not matter to your environment. And that is a specific question for your environment themselves, and depending what the actual application is. If something is supporting life safety, by God, you probably need support, be it internal or external or some kind of option. But if this is something that doesn't matter that much, you can get by with it without. Tools should really be out there to reduce cognitive load. We want to make sure that whatever we're doing, the tools are making our jobs easier, not making it more difficult. So if we're not meeting that kind of basic goal, we should really look at that. And again, speed running through, we've all played the FUD game. I will just openly state, the FUD game is strong and very prevalent in government because they are the vendors they are talking to. And they are told that, why wouldn't you have support on this? Why you need to be able to call a named account representative who will run you through these chains because otherwise you'll never get to somebody, which to me is an operational issue for that company, not for the supported clients. Oh, I clicked out, that's why. Okay. Government is bureaucracy. Everything takes forever. Everything is slow. That doesn't change when it comes into open source or anything else. But the benefit of bureaucracy works in our favor when we start having very open discussions on what our requirements are, what our expectations are, and what our citizens need. The biggest problems you find in government is because we don't know what our citizens need until we do it wrong, and they tell us very vocally and loudly and repeatedly, but they never tell us when they're doing it right. And remember that as you're working with government, there's a lot of things out there that are working fantastically, day in, day out. The Metro Transit of Minneapolis is one of the beacons in this area, watching the success rate of that compared to others we have throughout the country. No one talks about that. They talk about when the buses are late. So keep that in mind as we go through. Bureaucracy is actually working in our favor in this case, but it's going to be difficult in some ways to work through that process for any kind of large-scale change because the process is there. Not saying we can't streamline it sometimes, but it's political. Changing things is difficult. And remember, these are the people that we're doing it for. Again, government's work here is for the citizens itself. These are all citizens of Cass County. I just stole them from our various PR kind of things on there. Luckily, they all signed the agreement that the county can use them in whatever we want. So. But our citizens are why we are here. And sometimes political appointees and things like that or elected officials can forget that for various reasons. So if we're looking at what we're deploying out and we're making sure that at the end of the day, we are making our citizens' lives better. We are working for their needs. We are lifting up voices that may not be lifted. We are reinforcing people that need that reinforcement. We're working in the right direction. And there's my contact info if you want to get a hold of us, also on LinkedIn and everything else. I'll stick around out there if there's any questions or anything, but they want us out of this room because there's someone else coming. So.